The boutique's glass door swung shut behind her with a sharp clang, echoing through the quiet street. Emily Carter clutched her purse tightly, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment as she stepped onto the sidewalk. The security guard had been unyielding, his voice cold and dismissive. "We don't serve people like you here," he'd said, gesturing toward her worn-out sneakers and hand-me-down jacket. She hadn't even been able to afford the scarf she'd been admiring. Emily sighed, glancing at her watch. It was almost 3 in the afternoon, and she needed to pick up her 5-year-old son, Liam, from daycare. Her mind raced with worry. How would she explain this to him? How could she shield him from the harshness of the world when she barely managed to shield herself? As she walked briskly down the street, her phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from her best friend, Rachel. "Still on for coffee tonight?" Emily hesitated before replying. "I'll try, but no promises." Money was tight, and every dollar counted. Coffee was a luxury she couldn't always afford. Her thoughts drifted back to the boutique. She wasn't sure why she'd gone there in the first place. Maybe it was the allure of something beautiful, something that reminded her of who she used to be before life pulled the rug out from under her feet, before her marriage fell apart, before her ex-husband, Daniel Hartwell, became one of the wealthiest men in the city. She shook her head, trying to dispel the bitterness that threatened to overwhelm her. Thinking about Daniel only made things worse. He had moved on so easily, leaving her to struggle while he basked in his newfound success. She hadn't heard from him in months, not since the finalization of their divorce. Not that she wanted to hear from him, she just wished he'd remember that he had a son. Suddenly, a sleek black SUV pulled up beside her, its tinted windows reflecting the afternoon sun. Emily froze, her heart pounding. The car slowed to a stop, and the passenger window rolled down. Her breath caught in her throat as she recognized the driver. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice trembling. He leaned across the seat, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers. "Emily," he said, his tone unreadable. "Get in." "What are you doing here?" she asked, taking a step back. "How did you find me?" "I've been looking for you," he replied, ignoring her questions. "It's important. Please just get in." She hesitated, her mind racing. What did he want? Why now? But something in his expression, a mix of urgency and concern, made her reconsider. Reluctantly, she opened the door and slid into the passenger seat. The interior of the SUV smelled faintly of leather and expensive cologne. Emily felt out of place, her worn jeans and faded sweater starkly contrasting with the opulence surrounding her. She glanced at Daniel, noting the changes in him since their last encounter. His hair was shorter, his jawline sharper, and there was a new hardness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "What do you want, Daniel?" she asked, breaking the silence. He didn't answer immediately, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Finally, he spoke. "Liam, I need to see him." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "What? Why? You haven't shown any interest in him for months." "That's not true," he snapped, then softened his tone. "Look, I know I haven't been the best father, but things have changed. I need to make things right. For him. For him or for you?" She shot back, her anger bubbling to the surface. "You can't just waltz back into his life whenever it suits you. He's my son, Daniel, my responsibility." "I'm not asking for custody," he said quickly. I need to see him. There's something I need to tell both of you." Emily studied him carefully, searching for any sign of deception. Whatever he was hiding, it was clearly weighing heavily on him. Against her better judgment, she nodded. "Fine, but if you hurt him again, I swear, you won't have to worry about that," he interrupted, his voice firm. "I'm not the same man I was." The rest of the drive passed in tense silence, each lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived at the daycare center, Daniel parked the car, but made no move to get out. Instead, he turned to face Emily, his expression serious. "Before we go in, there's something you need to know," he began, his voice low. "Something about my past, about us." Emily's stomach churned. Whatever it was, she wasn't sure she wanted to hear it, but curiosity and perhaps a lingering hope kept her seated. "Go on," she said quietly. Daniel took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on hers. "Do you remember the night we met?" Daniel's words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Emily stared at him, her mind racing as fragments of memories flooded back. The night they had met, a chance encounter at a charity gala that had seemed so magical at the time. She remembered his charm, his confidence, and the way he had swept her off her feet. But now, sitting beside him in the sleek SUV, those memories felt tainted. "What about it?" she asked cautiously, her voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated, his fingers tapping nervously on the steering wheel. "That night, it wasn't an accident," he admitted finally, his tone tinged with regret. "I didn't just happen to be there. I was sent." "Sent?" Emily repeated, confusion knitting her brow. "What do you mean, sent?" Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "There's no easy way to say this, so I'll just come out with it. My family, they knew about you long before I ever did. They had their reasons for wanting us together." Emily's heart began to race. "Your family? What are you talking about?" "My father," Daniel continued, his voice strained. "He orchestrated everything. He wanted me to marry someone who would fit into the Hartwell legacy, someone who wouldn't challenge the status quo. You were perfect for that role, or so he thought." The revelation hit Emily like a punch to the gut. She felt dizzy, her thoughts spinning out of control. "So everything we had, our marriage, Liam, it was all part of some twisted plan?" "No," Daniel said quickly, turning to face her. "At least not for me. When I met you, I fell in love with you. That was real. But my father, he saw an opportunity, and he manipulated things to make sure I followed through. I didn't know the full extent of it until much later." Emily shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "How could you keep this from me? All these years, and you never once thought to tell me the truth?" "I wanted to," he insisted, his voice breaking, "but by the time I realized what had happened, it was too late. We were already married, and then Liam came along. I convinced myself that it didn't matter, that I loved you anyway, and that was enough. But now I see how wrong I was." The weight of his confession settled over them, filling the car with an uncomfortable silence. Emily struggled to process what she had just heard. Her entire life, her marriage, her son's existence had been built on a lie. And yet, despite her anger and hurt, a small part of her wondered if Daniel was telling the truth, if his love for her had been genuine. Finally, she spoke. "Why are you telling me this now, after all this time?" "Because I need your help," he replied, his expression earnest. "My father, he's dying, and before he goes, he wants to meet Liam." Emily's stomach churned at the thought. "Absolutely not. I won't let him anywhere near my son." "Please, Emily," Daniel pleaded. "This isn't about him, it's about Liam. He deserves to know where he comes from, to understand his heritage. I'm not asking you to forgive me or trust me. I'm just asking you to give him that." She looked at him, searching his eyes for any sign of deception, but all she saw was sincerity and pain. Against her better judgment, she nodded slowly. "Fine, but only because it's what's best for Liam, not for you, and certainly not for your father." Relieved, Daniel exhaled deeply. "Thank you. You won't regret this." As they stepped out of the car and approached the daycare center, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was making a mistake. Yet deep down, she knew that shielding Liam from the truth wouldn't protect him forever. Sometimes, facing the past was the only way to move forward. Inside the cheerful building, Liam sat happily coloring at a small table, surrounded by other children. His face lit up when he saw his mother, but his smile widened even further when he spotted Daniel. "Daddy!" he exclaimed, running toward them. Daniel crouched down, opening his arms wide as Liam crashed into him. For a moment, Emily watched them, her heart aching with conflicting emotions. Despite everything, she couldn't deny the bond between father and son. "Hey, buddy," Daniel said softly, ruffling Liam's hair. How would you like to go on a little adventure with me? Liam's eyes sparkled with excitement. Really? Where are we going? Daniel glanced at Emily, who gave him a subtle nod. Somewhere special, he replied. But first, we need to talk to Mommy about something important. As they sat down together, Emily took a deep breath. Explaining the situation to Liam wouldn't be easy, but she owed it to him to try. No matter how painful the truth might be. The daycare center's vibrant walls seemed to close in around Emily as she struggled to find the right words. Liam sat cross-legged on the floor, his wide eyes bouncing between her and Daniel. Sensing that something important was about to happen, Emily took a deep breath, her heart pounding as she prepared to navigate this delicate moment. "Liam," she began softly, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. Do you remember how we talked about family before? About how some families look different from others?" Liam nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, like how Max's dad lives far away, but he still loves him." Emily forced a smile, grateful for the simplicity of a child's perspective. "That's right. Well, sometimes families have secrets, things they don't talk about because they're hard or complicated." Daniel shifted uncomfortably beside her, his presence both a comfort and a reminder of the weight of what they were about to share. Emily glanced at him briefly before continuing. "Daddy has something he wants to tell us, something important about our family." Liam turned to Daniel, his curiosity piqued. "What is it, Daddy?" Daniel hesitated, his jaw tightening as he searched for the right words. Finally he spoke, his tone gentle but firm. "I want you to know that I love you very much, Liam. And I'm so proud to be your dad. But there are things about me and about where our family comes from that I haven't told you yet." Liam tilted his head, his innocent gaze fixed on Daniel. "Like what?" "Well," Daniel paused, glancing at Emily for support. She gave him a small nod, urging him to continue. "You know how Grandpa Hartwell is sick, right? He's my dad. And he wants to meet you, to get to know you." Liam's expression brightened. "Really? I've never met him before." "I know," Daniel said, his voice tinged with sadness, "and I'm sorry for that. But meeting him means you'll also learn some things about our family that might be hard to understand. Things I didn't even know myself until recently." Emily watched Liam carefully, her maternal instincts on high alert. His initial excitement was giving way to confusion, and she could see the questions forming in his mind. "Will he like me?" Liam asked quietly, his voice laced with uncertainty. Daniel reached out, placing a reassuring hand on Liam's shoulder. "Of course he will. You're an amazing boy, and anyone would be lucky to know you. But it's okay if you feel nervous or unsure. Mommy and I will be there with you every step of the way." Liam looked at Emily, seeking confirmation. She smiled warmly, though her heart ached with the enormity of the promise she was making. "We'll figure it out together, sweetheart. No matter what happens, you're not alone." With that, Liam seemed satisfied. For now. He hugged Daniel tightly, then climbed into Emily's lap, resting his head against her chest. The moment felt fragile, suspended between hope and uncertainty. Later that evening, as they prepared for their visit to Daniel's father, Emily found herself standing in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. Her thoughts were a jumble of fear, anger, and determination. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a lion's den, but for Liam's sake, she had to face it head-on. Daniel appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly. "No," Emily admitted, turning to face him, "but I don't think I'll ever be. This isn't just about you or your father anymore. It's about protecting Liam. From the truth, from pain, from everything." "I know," Daniel replied, his voice heavy with guilt, "and I swear I'll do whatever it takes to make sure he's safe, even if it means losing you again." His words caught her off guard, stirring emotions she had long buried. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to imagine a future where forgiveness might be possible. But reality quickly reasserted itself, reminding her of the scars that still lingered. As they drove to the sprawling estate where Daniel's father resided, the tension in the car was palpable. The mansion loomed ahead, its grandeur both awe-inspiring and intimidating. When they arrived, a frail but commanding figure greeted them in the foyer. Daniel's father, Charles Hartwell. "Emily," he said, his voice gravelly but authoritative. "It's been a long time." "Not long enough," Emily shot back, her tone icy. Beside her, Daniel winced, clearly torn between loyalty to his father and his desire to protect her. Charles ignored the jab, focusing instead on Liam. "And this must be my grandson," he said, his demeanor softening slightly. "Come closer, young man. Let me get a good look at you." Liam hesitated, clutching Emily's hand tightly. She gave it a reassuring squeeze, encouraging him to step forward. As Charles studied Liam, his eyes gleamed with a mixture of pride and regret. "You have your mother's spirit," he remarked finally, "but your father's strength, a fine combination." For a brief moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Then Charles gestured for them to follow him into the study, where he revealed the true reason for his summons, a legacy tied to Liam's future, one that would change their lives forever. The study was dimly lit, the heavy drapes drawn tight against the fading evening light. Charles Hartwell sat in a high-backed leather chair, his frail frame almost swallowed by its imposing silhouette. On the desk before him lay a series of documents, their contents obscured, but their weight palpable. Emily stood protectively beside Liam, her arms crossed tightly across her chest, while Daniel hovered near the doorway, torn between his father's authority and his family's safety. Charles gestured for them to sit, his movements slow but deliberate. "I didn't bring you here to waste time," he began, his voice steady despite his visible fragility. "What I have to say concerns all of you, but especially you, Liam." Liam looked up at Emily, uncertainty flickering in his young eyes. She knelt beside him, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "It's okay," she whispered, though her own heart raced with apprehension. Charles continued, his gaze fixed on Liam. "You are the heir to the Hartwell name, a name that carries both privilege and responsibility. When I'm gone, everything I've built will pass to Daniel. But beyond that, there is a trust fund set aside specifically for you. It's substantial enough to secure your future, no matter what path you choose." Emily stiffened, her mind racing. "And what do you expect in return?" she asked sharply, her tone laced with suspicion. "Because nothing in this world comes without strings attached. Not from you." Charles chuckled dryly, the sound devoid of warmth. "Perceptive as always, Emily. Yes, there are conditions. The trust fund is tied to certain obligations. Liam must be educated in a way that aligns with our family's values. He must understand the weight of his inheritance and the expectations that come with it." Daniel stepped forward, his expression darkening. "What exactly are you saying, Father? That Liam has to become some kind of puppet for the Hartwell empire?" "No," Charles replied, his tone sharp, "but he cannot remain ignorant of who he is or where he comes from. This isn't just about money. It's about legacy, about ensuring that the next generation doesn't squander what we've worked so hard to build." Emily rose to her feet, her anger bubbling to the surface. "Liam is 5 years old. He doesn't need to hear about legacies or empires. He needs love, guidance, and the freedom to make his own choices. You don't get to dictate his life because you feel guilty about your own failures." For a moment, silence filled the room. Charles studied Emily, his piercing gaze searching hers. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled, a faint, almost imperceptible curve of his lips. "You're right," he admitted softly. "I've made mistakes, too many to count, and perhaps it's too late for me to undo them. But I can still try to ensure that Liam doesn't repeat them." Daniel exhaled sharply, clearly caught off guard by his father's admission. "Why now?" he demanded. "After all these years, why are you suddenly trying to change?" "Because death has a way of clarifying things," Charles replied, his voice tinged with regret. "I won't pretend I've been a good man or a good father, but I want to leave something behind that matters. something more than wealth or power. The tension in the room softened slightly, though Emily remained wary. She glanced at Liam, who was watching the exchange with wide-eyed curiosity. "What happens if we refuse?" she asked, her voice firm. Charles sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Then the trust fund remains untouched until Liam turns 18. By then, he'll have the choice to accept or reject it. But I hope you'll consider giving him the opportunity to understand his heritage, to decide for himself what kind of man he wants to be." Emily hesitated, her instincts screaming at her to walk away. Yet, as she looked at Liam, she realized that shielding him completely might do more harm than good. He deserved to know the truth, even if it came with complications. Finally, she nodded. "We'll think about it. But on one condition, any decision involving Liam's future will be made by me, and only me. You don't get to interfere, Charles, not anymore." Charles inclined his head, a gesture of reluctant respect. "Agreed." As they left the mansion, the air felt lighter, though the weight of their conversation lingered. Back in the car, Liam broke the silence. "Mummy, does this mean Grandpa likes me now?" Emily smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. "He's trying, sweetheart. That's all anyone can ask for." Later that night, as Emily tucked Liam into bed, she found herself reflecting on the day's events. Despite the challenges ahead, she felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that they could navigate this new chapter together. In the living room, Daniel waited for her, his expression tentative. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for letting me be part of this. I know I don't deserve it, but I promise I'll do better. For Liam and for you." Emily met his gaze, her heart conflicted, but open to the possibility of healing. "We'll see," she replied simply. Call to action. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. What do you think Emily should do next? Trust Daniel or keep him at arm's length for Liam's sake? Let us know in the comments below.